Hello viewers, this is the recording of the Azure DevOps demo. This is Sean speaking, and I've been working with Joe on our DevOps initiatives. In this demo, I'll cover a brief overview of the Azure DevOps pipeline and release steps, as it will likely be one of our preferred cloud platforms in the future. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Okay, so for this demo, say I wanted to re-envision GCADC or Network to Work as a modern Angular 8 project. As a side note, I could have done this demo in as a Net Core app or an ASP.NET app, but I went with Angular since I thought it looked cooler. All right, in this example, I have a GCADC Nebular folder or repository. This is actually out on the Dynamism GitHub for anybody who wants to go check it out. I actually have 3 projects in here: admin, API, and client. Client is the Angular 8 project over here. So this is the one that we'll be focusing on. Okay, so to prove that it's actually working locally over here, so I've run npm start, and it's running on localhost 4200. So let's go out there and check it out. So here it is, localhost 4200. It's got some cool theming over here. It's got an awesome search bar. It's got some cool interactive graphs. But really, the big takeaway out of all this is the URL. Yep, this is running on localhost and port 4200. That means that it's only running on my machine, and it's not available to the public anywhere on the cloud yet. So the goal of CI/CD is to get this code from a machine working locally out onto the cloud, hosted in a server, in a continuous and automated manner. So Azure is able to accomplish this using their 2 tools, Azure DevOps and the Azure Portal, which we'll cover at the end. So we'll start with Azure DevOps. So let's go over here. I'll click on the Azure DevOps home. This is the Azure DevOps portal. You can have many projects in here. We'll just be looking at GCADC for this demo. So I'll go ahead and click on that. Side note, GCADC at this time of the recording is not actually in Azure. This is just a demo project. Maybe one day it will be, but for now, this is what we're using for the demo. CI/CD in Azure DevOps is accomplished with 2 main steps: pipelines and releases over here. Pipelines is actually recently rebranded from builds, and they called it pipelines now. What do these 2 terms really mean? What are pipelines and releases? Pipelines or builds refers to the process in which we compile code in order to most efficiently serve it up on the server. So pipelines will build the code out on the cloud for us, and then releases is the second step to CI/CD, which is taking that compiled code, copying it out to a server and hosting it on there so everyone can see it as an actual website at a URL. So these 2 combined are CI/CD in the Azure world. And then the Azure portal is used for the infrastructure, the hosting. All right, so let's get into the pipelines. So pipelines, or the builds, you can see this is the pipelines UI over here. I have 3 set up already, 1 for each of my projects: admin, API, and client. But we're going to showcase creating an entirely new pipeline. So we'll do that over here by clicking the New Pipeline button. And this will bring us to a wizard. So the wizard gives us a few options. Where is our source code coming from? So build pipelines, really their goal is to take code from some sort of repository, in our case a Git repo, and then build it or compile it out on a server. So here, as we mentioned, there's Azure repos, Bitbucket, GitHub. We are going to be using generic Git repository. And then, of course, there's the version. Nobody really cares about that. So go ahead and click Other. This will bring us to the pipeline, first step in the pipeline page. So this is where I'm going to connect to Git. I've actually already set up my connection to our Tech Dynamism Git repository. This step over here will let us select a branch. So I'm going to go ahead and select development. So this is useful if we want to have different branches, development going to, say, a dev URL, release going to test, and then master typically goes to production. So this demo will use development. I'll hit continue. This will allow us to select a template. Templates for builds are basically predefined build steps that Azure provides for you. You can see there's some for ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, Ant, etc., etc. I'm going to go ahead and go with an empty job for this Angular project, so we can see the step-by-step process. This brings us to the edit page for our build pipeline. The very top has our name, so I'll go ahead and call this an GCADC demo. This is our build, so the name reflects the one I just changed. Then we have a couple fields for the agent. Agents in this world are basically the machine that is going to be doing the compiling or the building for you. Azure gives you a default pipeline, but you can also set up your own private one if you have some complex building that's going on. This is typically some sort of VM that you stand up, and it's got its own custom configuration. For this demo, I'll use the default. Agent specification, what OS are you using? Mac OS, Ubuntu, Windows. I'm going to pick Windows 2019 because who doesn't love Windows? All right. Our sources, this we've specified this already. This is our Git repo. Where is it coming from? What branch? And then other configuration, I'll leave that alone for now, but you can explore it as you will. And the third step is, once again, more custom configuration on the agent if you really want to. Say, give it a name, agent pool, etc., etc. But I'll go on to the tasks. So the tasks are really the core of the build. So how are you going to build your app? There's a bunch of default kind of steps that you can choose, some for .NET Core, Ant, etc. I'm going to do npm because this is an Angular app. So npm, I'll add that in. It'll add in npm install. By default, I'm actually going to pick npm CI. This is for servers. And then the working directory for me will be the client directory because I actually have 3 different projects inside my repo, and client is the one that is the Angular app. So, of course, if you only have one project inside your repo, you may not even need to specify this. I do, though, so I'll go ahead and add my next step after the npm CI. I want to build, so I'll go ahead and add a different one this time, say a command line run script, and this one will be npm run build. Pretty simple. Once again, the working directory for me is client. And then the third step over here, this one is an Azure specific step. This is publishing the artifact. So what is an artifact? In the Azure world, artifacts are basically your compiled code at the end of this build. So your build is going to run, it's going to compile everything, and then you'll end up with a bunch of files. Azure is going to package them all up, sometimes into a zip file, other times just into some neat little package, and then that package is going to be picked up by the release, the second step, to be deployed out to a server. So in my case, it defaults you to the staging directory, but I'll go ahead and say go out to client dist, since that is the Angular file location for the compiled code, and I'll call it dist. Angular likes dist, and then I'll go ahead and save this. So the saved folder, I'm just going to leave as default over here. You can pick different projects, but I only have one for now. Okay, and it saves my build. So in order to actually kick this off, I've configured everything I needed to configure. The last step is like, let's run this thing. So queuing is the button you want to hit, the play button. It'll once again prompt you with a few of the configurations that you may want to specify or change. I'm good with leaving it as it is. So default Azure Pipeline, Windows 2019. I'm running on development branch. I'm not going to bother with the commit because I'm a bad developer, but you can make your own commits in the real world. You can specify variables over here. You can specify demand. I'm going to leave these default, and then I'm just going to go ahead and run it. So running it will bring you to the list of agents. Once again, agents are basically the machines that are running or compiling your code out on the cloud. So you can declare multiple different agents and run them all in parallel. You can run them synchronously. You can stagger them basically however you want to scale your application as it gets larger, so you don't run into any blockers just waiting on builds on the server. So you can see actually the little ticker over here. I'll go ahead and click on it, and we can see what that ticker represents. That's actually where the agent is at in its checklist of steps that we declared. So you can actually see it took 2 seconds to spin up the agent itself, and then six more seconds to go ahead and grab it from our Git repository, and it is currently working on the npm CI command. So this is a real-time feed of what's happening out on the server. If you ever want to see it, green check marks are it's succeeded. Blue is it's currently in process. Red X's means they've failed and it'll stop. And then these ones, blank circles, haven't been run yet. So I'll let this run in the background, and we'll move on to the next step, which will be the releases. Actually, I can show you real quick as well. I have created an existing working copy of the demo that we're doing right now for the build, and so this is a working version, so you can see a history of all the builds that I've done. Red X's are ones that have already failed in the past. Green is succeed, so I failed a bunch, then I succeeded, then I failed, then I succeeded. You can see the individual times of each build. Mine's right around 4 minutes for most of them. You can retain certain ones for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, they get deleted to clean up space. You can click on them, and then it brings you to you can see the full list of every step and what happened. Okay, and then you can look at branches. Of course, mine just has dev and master, and then some basic analytics. So this covers the first step in CI/CD, which is the pipelines, and then we'll move on to releases over here. So releases, as a reminder, releases are basically we'll take the compiled code from the pipeline, the artifact, and then we'll deploy it out to a server. So here's our releases UI. You can see, once again, I have 3 already made for my existing 3 projects over here, but we'll go ahead and create a new pipeline for this demo. So that's done with this new release pipeline over here. And then it'll ask you to select a template if you want. This is where we connect to the Azure portal. So where is our app service or app deployed out to? I'm going to pick the Azure App Service deployment. That's what we'll be using for this demo. And then we can see the screen over here. So we can see artifacts and stages. Those are our 2 kind of steps to a release. And at the top is our name. We can rename this, of course. So I'll call this a GCADC demo release. And then the first step is to connect this release to a pipeline. So that's done via the artifact. So the output of a pipeline, once again, a build pipeline, is an artifact or a packaged up compiled code. So I'll click Add Artifact in order to connect it to the pipeline that we created earlier. And so the Add Artifacts screen will come up over here. You can choose the source type. I'm going to connect it to my build. My project is GCADC, and the source build pipeline is the demo that we have been creating. Then it'll populate a couple fields, one for the default version, one for the alias if you wish to give it a different name. Defaults to latest default version. You can choose different ones. If you don't want to go with latest, I'll go with latest for this demo. Click add, and bam, there it is. Once you've added it, this little lightning bolt will appear. This is how you trigger continuous deployment. So if I toggle this little toggle over here, then anytime a build completes successfully, it's going to kick off this release. And that's what I want for CI/CD. So I can also add branch filters. So in this case, I want to limit my releases only to the development branch. I don't want to be kicking off master releases for different branches. I just want this. In this case, I'm just doing development. And then the last step here is stages. So there's a little red circle. I have not completed doing this yet over here and over here. So I'll click on this. This one's just saying, what stage name do I want to name it? Stages are, in other words, the deployment. So artifact and then deploy it. Okay, so I'll close that, and I have a red circle over here. And now this is where we're connecting our release to Azure. So my stage name has been brought in, and I'm going to connect it to an Azure subscription. I'm going to use Ryan's. Thank you, Ryan. It's going to populate. I'm going to select my app type. So there are many app types: web app on Windows, web app on Linux, containers, functions, API mobile. I'm going to stick with the web app on Windows, and then the service name. So I've already created an app service called GCADC demo and client. I'll go ahead and click demo over here. And that's it for really this step. We can also take a look at the agent once again. So this is the agent to deploy the app. Once again, there's default Azure pipelines. You can make your own different agent specifications over here and more. And then this task over here will define the actual deployment. So this is my deployment name, deploy Azure App Service, aptly named, Azure Resource Manager, my subscription, thanks Ryan, the service type, the app service name, is this a virtual application, where am I going, and then the package or folder. So this is really what we want to call out over here. This here is actually the artifact that has been built out from the build pipeline that we made earlier. So the GCADC demo build pipeline looks like it's actually finished already. We can see under this dist folder all the compiled files from our build. So I'll go ahead and select that dist because that is what I want to deploy out to the server. All right, so I'll go ahead and hit save on here. Where do I want to put this pipeline? Under all pipelines, that's fine. I'll save it, and then if I hit create release over here, it's going to kick off a release or deployment to our Azure App Service. So before I get into that, let me flip over to the Azure portal. So here, this is the Azure portal. This is separate from the Azure DevOps portal. These are two different places. The Azure portal is where we're going to keep track of our app services, or the actual hardware that's running our application. So app services here, you can see I've created a few already, but we'll go through briefly what you're going to do to add your own app service so you can get your own website up and running. So if I click add over here, you pick your subscription, always Ryan's, and then resource group. I've created a resource group for GCADC Windows specifically. This is basically just a logical grouping of how you want to assign your different resources or app services, functions, what you name it, you assign them to resource groups. The web app name, as mentioned before, I created one called GCADC demo or client, so both are taken, and it'll let you know that over here. But if you come up with a new one, it'll give a little green check mark. Publish, so is this code that you're publishing, or is it a container? The runtime stack, .NET Core, ASP.NET, operating system, Linux or Windows, region, I'm in West US, and then the service plan. So how are you planning to pay, and how big do you want the server to be? So the larger the server, obviously, probably the faster it is, and you can kind of scale up and down using this service plan over here. So I'm not actually going to go through and create this since I already did, but I'll escape this and go into one that has already been created. So this GC/DC demo I just created, and it's actually, I haven't done anything to it. I haven't deployed anything to it. It's just a blank app service over here. This is what you're going to see. So a bunch of configuration stuff. The one that we're going to care about for this demo is this URL. So if I click this URL over here, I will be navigated to my website. So to start, I haven't deployed anything to it. This is what it's going to look like. So it's just a blank page with a couple buttons. Once you deploy it, though, it's obviously going to look like your code. So we can hop over to a deployed version over here, and I'll hop over in the release side so we can check out what a successful run looks like. So here I've made one for the client development deployment release pipeline, and you can see a history once again, and the latest release 11, succeeded, and we can take a look if I want on exactly what happened. And if I really want to dig into it, I can look at the logs, and this may look familiar to the original build logs, where it consoles out every single step that happened and whether you succeeded or failed. So this one succeeded, and when it succeeded, not that, but let's take a look at this over here. And there it is. So my website is out, anyone can access it, and that is CI/CD in about 20 minutes or so. So that ends my presentation. Thanks for listening. If you have any other questions, once again, feel free to leave them in the comments below. All right, thanks. This is Sean signing out.